Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
So a little backstory, I have extreme anxiety and I get anxious fast. My uncle is Italian, so English is his second language and he has a thick accent. We worked out in the garden. In the story, Karen, Italian uncle, I-U, me, O-P. Cook 1, cook 2, server, and manager? Back to the story, my uncle came over and we started working in the garden. It took about 6 or 7 hours. We finished for the day and leave the house and start walking down the street for a place to eat. We found a Mexican restaurant and so we ordered our dinner and were waiting when in walks Karen. She's wearing a nurse outfit and a name tag on her lanyard. Let me just put in that this is that same day they started allowing indoor dining. So my uncle and I get our food and sit inside and start eating. Karen saw us and started screaming at us that we were killers for eating inside. My uncle looked at her, then at me, then said, "This witch is crazy" in Italian. We both laughed, which only got her even more enraged. So my uncle and I get our food and sit inside and start eating. Karen saw us and started screaming at us that we were killers for eating inside. My uncle looked at her, then at me, then said, "This witch is crazy" in Italian. We both laughed, which only got her even more enraged. She took our food and threw it in the trash, saying that she is the owner's wife and that we were banned. She was also waving her badge in my face while saying she's a nurse. While this was going on, my anxiety was building up since I don't like people screaming at me since I was adopted and was traumatized by it when I was little. At that moment, the actual owner, who was a middle-aged man, walked in to hand out the paychecks to his workers. Turns out, I actually knew him. He used to be my tutor for math. He calls the cops after the manager tells him what's going on. The owner tells the 2 cooks to tear down the only pickup signs and get rid of them. Then he tells the server to get the sign from the back room and put dine-ins welcome. The police arrived and put her into handcuffs, and as she got dragged out, she tried playing victim in that she was the owner's wife. The owner just laughed, which got everyone's attention. Then he said, "Lady, I am the owner, and you're old enough to be my grandmother." I see the 4 cops trying hard not to cry and laugh. One doubled over with laughter. When everything was back to normal and Karen was gone, the owner and the manager came over and remade our food, gave us a refund, and out of nowhere, the 2 cooks came over and gave my uncle a special dessert called an ice cream churro. The server actually asked for my phone number and she sent me a video. Turns out she videotaped everything. We still chat to this day. Well, that's my entitled Karen story. I used to work in childcare, and as anyone in that profession can tell you, there's no shortage of crazy entitled parents out there that sadly, you sometimes have to deal with. The center I worked for was a family business. My parents opened it together in the early 80s and it closed its doors in 2020 after Mom passed from cancer. Most of my siblings and I worked there at some point, and it was my full-time job for a good few years. This story takes place in the summer of 2020, a few months after Mom's passing and a few before the center closed. I was closer, which meant there were times when I'd be by myself towards the end of the day when we only had 1 or 2 kids remaining, though my dad and sisters were at home across the street and only a phone call away in case of an emergency. Usually it would be the same group picked up last, the Martin siblings, fake name, who were awesome kids I got along really well with. Their mom though. This particular afternoon I'm bracing myself for an encounter, as I have a few complaints from other parents to address with them. Martin when she gets here. See, she liked to leave her car idling in the parking lot when she picked up her kids, which is fine as this is a low crime area and the process only takes about a minute from start to finish. However, she'd also left her radio blaring the whole time, which was brought to our attention when another parent came to us and said she almost crashed on the highway when her 4-year-old suddenly asked about a very popular, very inappropriate Cardi B song. Naturally, we can't have people blasting inappropriate music in our parking lot, so when she shows up, I pull her aside and explain to her calmly and politely that there have been some complaints about some inappropriate music coming from her car when she pulls in, and I ask that from now on, she turn her radio off before coming into the building. A reasonable request, one may think. But oh, one would apparently be wrong. It's been a few years since then, so I can't remember her tirade verbatim, but she went off on me over this, practically screaming that I'm just a sensitive little white boy who can't handle her culture and that this is just more of the racist nonsense she has to deal with it every day. For reference, I'm white and she's Hispanic, but that was never even close to being the issue. The issue is that Cardi B's rapping about genitalia in our parking lot. I have no idea why she even thinks this is the case, but sadly, I'm not really that surprised to be getting this kind of reaction from her, as she's made a few scenes like this in the past over similar issues. On and on she goes, accusing me and my family of being racist, classist, and any other kind of ist you can think of, and all the while, I'm staying calm and trying to reassure her that race has nothing to do with this. We just can't have adult music playing in a kid-friendly space. And then, she says something special. I'm just in a hurry to visit my friend who's dying. You know, like your mom did. Mom's loss is still very much an open wound at this point, and there's so many things I want to say to her. First being take your kids, get out, and don't ever come back. But I keep my cool, apologize for her situation, and walk away to start my cleaning before either of us have a chance to escalate things. A few minutes later, after she's gone and I'm alone in the building, I call my older sisters, who are also working here and handle most of the administrative stuff, and tell them about how the conversation went. I was proud to be able to say that despite being royally pissed at Mrs. Martin, I remained calm and professional, and didn't just tell her to get the hell out. However, my sister's response shocked me. They asked, "Why didn't you?" They agree that the way she acted was way out of line, and all the previous warnings she'd received for other little stunts on top of the personal insult about our mother's recent death were the last straw. They remind me that this isn't the kind of crap Mom would put up with, so we won't either. As soon as they were off the phone with me, they rang up Mrs. Martin to tell her all the things that I wanted to, including the bit about never coming back. And, well, she didn't. I no longer work in childcare, and sometimes I find myself missing it enough to want to apply at another center, until I remember people like Mrs. Martin. When I was in my early 20s, I worked for a salvage yard where we used 10-ton payloaders to move cars around on a regular basis. My bosses had also just recently installed security cameras all around the yard because of the thefts by a former employee. This will be important later. Now, just for a clearer understanding, we had big signs on the gates to the yard saying that when the gates are closed, do not enter since equipment is in use. The reason for this should be obvious, but in case it's not, let me describe these machines. The tires are about 10 feet tall and you have a limited view of the area around you. And if you are moving a large vehicle, you have to pay a lot of attention to what you are moving so it doesn't fall. Enter the male, carrying that. This guy drove a brand new Porsche and totally ignored the signs on the gate and pulled his car into the yard right in the middle of the path we use when moving cars. As I said, your field of view is severely limited in this equipment, which is the reason for the signs since you usually are watching the cars on either side as a guide. Needless to say, his car got run over end to end. To make matters worse, it put a big hole in the tire of the payloader, which then settled down onto his car, further flattening it. The guy was furious and came out of the office screaming at me. I thought for sure I was fired, but then my boss looked at him and asked him why did he pull his car into the yard in the first place. The guy tried to say that the gate wasn't closed, which my boss knew was B since he was the one who closed it for me. The guy starts yelling about lawsuits and charges and is calling the police. Big mistake, big mistake. When the cops show up, they greet my boss and me by name and then turn to the male Karen and ask him what was the problem. The guy makes mistake 2, he gets in the cop's face and asks, "Are you blind or stupid?" They destroyed my new car on purpose. They destroyed my new car on purpose. Now the officer knew that we had just installed the cameras, so asked to see the footage. He goes in and 10 minutes later comes back out and tells the guy that he was right, that charges were justified and damages would also probably be levied against the offender. The guy got this smug look on his face right up until the cop put the cuffs on him for trespassing, since you could clearly see him read the signs, and then removed the chain and opened the gates himself. Just for reference, his car had shredded 3 of the 4 tires on the payloader and they cost $800 each. For some context, me and my entire friend group have had problems with bullies at our high school ever since we could remember, but we mostly ignored the problem altogether. About a few months ago, Ali, one of the girls that always bullied us, decided to directly target my closest friend D. It wasn't just some simple offhand comments, it was an entire Instagram page created to body shame and consistently bully D. First, it was comparing her to a whale, then posting unsolicited photos of D without her even knowing. Ali kept posting and never seemed to stop. Whenever D would see the account and what was in it, she would burst into tears. I hated seeing my best friend feel like absolute dirt because of some pathetic girl. I knew D didn't deserve any of it. She's one of the nicest and honest people I've ever met. She helps anyone without even questioning it. I decided to do something about the page, about Ali altogether. My friend group went around the school, asking every person who we knew was close to Ali, or at least was considered to be friends with her about things she had done in the past. I uncovered a lot of dirt on her. Her friends weren't ashamed of what they were doing or what they had done. They just had never revealed it directly, but they would take any chance to brag about it and be like Regina George wannabes. I finally had proof that Ali was the one running the page. Bullying D. One of her friends felt bad about it and sent me pictures that showed Ali was the creator of the page. I told everything to our school counselor. She contacted Ali herself and got her to take the page down. She had to do over 100 hours of community time after the counselor found out. I decided to reveal what Ali and her friends had done. I revealed it to my classroom, sharing secrets with a bunch of teenagers, and spreading it was the one thing I knew would happen, so I just let it happen. By the end of the school year, almost everyone knew what Ali had done. Almost no one wanted to interact with her, or even look at her. The only time anyone would interact with her was to make offhand comments or look at her weirdly. She felt so ignored that she ended up moving out of town altogether, not before without picking a fight with me about how my friend group ruined her life, about how it was our fault her boyfriend wanted nothing to do with her, about how we were childish and could have just solved the problem by talking to her. I told her I didn't feel bad about it. I didn't understand why she would direct the page at D in the first place. Ali just told me she was bored and D was already antisocial, so only our friend group would care about the page. Her parents hadn't even known about the entire situation. I found her mom's Instagram and sent her all the proof of what her daughter had done. Her mom grounded her and took away all her privileges. Phone, car, everything. She left the school a while after that. I don't know what happened after she moved since it's been around a year since it happened, but I can't say I'll ever regret what I did. My mother-in-law is legally blind with less than 10 sight and uses a guide dog. She lives in a street where all homes have a driveway and there's room to park on the road if need be. However, I'll often see someone who's parked on the pavement, sidewalk, with literally less than a foot between the car and the garden wall. If my mother-in-law would go out with the dog and come to this hazard, the dog would have to take her around the car and into the road. The dog is amazing, but it's still not safe for a blind person to have to walk into the road. I contacted the council numerous times, but they did nothing. So whenever me, my partner, and mother-in-law would go walking, if we encountered these idiot parkers, my partner would escort his mom and dog around the car, whereas I would close my eyes like I was a blind person and squeeze between the car and garden wall. And unfortunately, I'd always hit the wing mirror, often knocking it off the car. Depending on the car's age, it would either hang off the car or fall clean to the floor. This issue still happens, but I'm always ready. I hate selfish parkers. This happened yesterday. I teach at a public school. Occasionally, in the hallway I teach in, there's an overwhelming sewage smell. Normally it's an inconvenience, but not so drastic we have to move rooms. Yesterday, it was the worst I've ever experienced since I started teaching at this school. Teachers immediately tried to move their classrooms, get out of the hallway, etc. One class moved into the principal's conference room, and from the gist of it, our principal was livid that her space was invaded. We received an email stating that we are not to move our classes without notifying our supervisor. Now that seems logical. However, the email went on to say that we are not allowed to leave our room to stroll, visit another classroom, etc., without speaking to our supervisor or the front office. I was absolutely fired up when I read this email. I wanted to make her regret sending it as quickly as possible. I notified everyone in my hallway that they should be calling the office every time they needed to use the bathroom. I encouraged as many teachers as possible to constantly be calling to notify them of their movement around campus. Within 2 hours, I'd called the front office 4 times, once even just to let them know I was walking down to the front office. Most of the teachers in my building called a couple times. Once, when the main receptionist was on lunch and another support staff was covering for her, I called to let them know I was going to the bathroom, and the woman on the other end sounded so confused. "Do you need something?" she awkwardly asked. I explained it was that per the email it was expected for us to notify the office of our bathroom breaks. She chuckled and told me to have a good time. Within 3 hours, we received another staff-wide email explaining, okay, some clarification, and that we should not call the office if we need to go to the bathroom, have a stroll on campus, or visit another teacher's classroom. I walked down to the office later that day with the biggest grin on my face, and every support staff knew exactly why I was so happy. We all had a good laugh. One of the support staff said to me that the principal said I didn't mean it literally. If you're going to put something in writing to a group of professional educators and be aggressive and rude about it, you better know exactly what you are saying.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.